Welcome to Business Consulting Simplified. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how to augment with AI.
Yeah, I'm Javier. Here at Simplified Web Solutions, the solutions architect and founder, co-founder. And Borin, you want to introduce, I guess, what you do here at Simplified Web Solutions?
I'm Borin. I'm also co-founder of Simplified Web Solutions. I am the product manager for Simplified Web Solutions.
Awesome. So, you wanted to talk about AI and how it would help augment some of the tasks we have.
Yeah, so one of the things that you hear in the mainstream media, they make it sound like AI is very dangerous if we do not limit its growth. It does sound scary out there. However, we kind of want to focus on the benefits of AI and how it could augment your business and how even we've used it to augment our business. Javier, I know we've used AI throughout, for several projects. Do you have any examples that you want to give to the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more common case that you'll see out there right now, and this was more or less on the verge of where language models were coming out, like ChatGPT. Before that, obviously, it was like GPT 4, 3, 2, 1, right? The original. Um, there was a tool, Jasper, out there that basically allowed you or helped you create content. That was the very beginning of a lot of this experimentation. And one of the projects that we worked on was seeing how we could leverage some of that in some of the processes for some of our clients, how to create content for their websites, create blog posts, and so on. There were other projects as well where it was a little bit more on the machine learning side of things, not so much with language models, but to be able to recognize patterns, such as positive or negative sentiments within certain comments. So you could think about the application of this being more or less reviews, emails. So you could prioritize certain sentiment versus others, that sort of thing. We had it enabled for ensuring that the content that was being produced was of positive sentiment as another example or use case, making sure that the editors, it was like the first pass, right? Like a lot of checks that happen in content creation, um, making sure that the content that was being produced was never in a negative light.
That's a good example you gave there. I wanted to focus on how it was the first pass because it was really important there that AI was there to help determine what needed to be looked at. This has negative sentiment. Please check it out. But AI itself couldn't give the final decision on whether something's negative or positive, but it made the job of what would you call them, an editor
Yep.
to basically reduce their workload by focusing on patterns that are really negative words, negative combination of sentences, whatever it is, without having to read everything. You could keep them more focused on what is potentially negative. So that's a way it could augment an editor's work.
It does ultimately do a great job at detecting sentiment. I think that's one of the most trivial examples of what it can do. But what it can't do, and a lot of this you could tweak and tune, but what it can't do is it can't make judgment calls based off of that, right? Like, so from there, you go into more of uh, programming the process of what happens if it is negative sentiment. In some situations, do you kick it back? Do you send it to an editor for review? Do you send it somewhere else for some other purpose? So it's just a specific part of the process, but it never really, takes on the entire content writing process because there's a lot more that is involved in this.
Awesome. Thank you. I like that you gave a little bit of history of AI, and I want people to realize that AI has been around for a very long time. It's just that it got recently commercialized, it's recently available to the masses. But what are some common examples that AI's been around that people have not noticed? Um, for example, Instagram filters, right? Because they're using your face to smooth it out, add features, throw makeup on. That is through some machine learning and AI, and it's always been there, but people weren't afraid then.
Mm-hmm.
So what changed?
I think you're right. AI, or I guess more at the core level, what it was before as machine learning, has been around for quite some time, and it's been put through different, research papers as this method of being able to pick up on patterns, and that's effectively all AI is at this point in time. It's just picking up patterns and then being able to replicate things. So I think the point at which it became a little bit more scary, I think some people would view it this way, is when you start getting to the point of being blurring the lines of what it is to come from or be produced from, a computer program in sorts, and what individual can create. Google had this one scenario where, if we recall, there was an engineer that was working on one of their earlier AI models. And I don't recall the exact conversation, but the questions were more or less leaning on what are some of the things that you fear, what are some of your desires and stuff like that. And obviously, because it's a language model, it would return things that are very common for people to say in those situations. And the engineer on the other side was unable to sort of distinguish that it wasn't really thinking for itself. It was really more picking up on pre-existing patterns and sort of regurgitating those.
Well, that's interesting, because that kind of goes back to a little bit of psychology, even the human mind, because there is learned behavior. Things that Pavlov did, where they did a pattern and we are taught a response. Can we say AI is being taught a response? Because it's basically learning on input of data and how people respond to it. AI is going to get that data and respond that way. So, do humans only learn to fear things just because they've been taught, hey, don't cross the road when there's busy traffic? Is that something we learn, or is that something somebody's been telling us not to cross the street when there's busy traffic because it looks dangerous?
Going back to the machine learning part of things, the first thing I wanted to say is you don't learn not to cross the street because there's traffic because somebody told you. I think you see through example, and if you have kids, right, a lot of times you could tell them all you want what they shouldn't be doing, but at the end of the day, they're gonna try some of those things, and they're gonna learn the hard way, and they're gonna learn, that fire is hot, that certain things are hot, that certain things, are spicy, and they're going to have negative experiences that provide that feedback loop. And so it's not so much about just being told, but it's more about experiences. In a similar way, machine learning functions just like that. It has these individual nodes where it's very simple responses of flipping a switch from false to positive, or zeros and ones, where it says, hey, if it has this feature, it is turned on, right? If it doesn't have this feature, it's turned off. And you have a lot of those little neural network nodes, and that's effectively all machine learning is. So in a sense, yes, it's very like there's a huge amount of relevance and overlap between experiences and these individual nodes.
Great. That's awesome. So let's talk about how you mentioned you could tell a child fire's hot, and sometimes they would have to do touch it to learn it. We have used AI in that way, have we not? Because we've had AI treated in a way like it's an assistant, right? We don't expect AI to do everything, but we've had asked it to help us with some research. It returned with a response. We gave it a positive or negative feedback based on that response. So then, based on that, it will return a different result because it's learned from our responses. So maybe we're the fire. Hey, you're going off base. Now we're getting hot. So is that one way AI in the future can be a lot more human-like? And as his data becomes more available, AI models become better. We get better graphic cards to have better AI models that it can crunch a lot more and just keep a lot of our sentiments on how we feel about things and return back with data that is more attuned with us because it knows us now. Is that the future of AI?
I think that's the rudimentary feature of AI. I think that's just a capacity feature. I don't think that that's going to be the thing that makes AI scarier per se. There's a couple things we could touch on, but very recently, data models are actually starting to become smaller, not bigger. And one of the reasons for that is they're trying to make more or less specialized AI models. And these AI models, what they're finding is that it's really about the quality of the data that you feed it. Some of the earlier models that we've seen up to GPT-4 are really just trying to throw everything at it, right? They're throwing Reddit, they're throwing Twitter, they're throwing every encyclopedia, the whole internet into it. But what they're finding is that it's not actually getting better. There's a lot of things that they've found underneath the hood or discovered some things that they certainly haven't been expecting. But at the end of the day, the positive that they're getting is that if you give it cleaner data, you're going to get better results at the end of the day. And in the same vein, how this works is they're trying to make these smaller models because at the same time, they want to make them more portable. So there's kind of two benefits to that. So that's one aspect of it. I think what would really make AI scarier would be the point where it starts sort of learning for itself, where it's no longer learning from our experiences, all the information we've produced. It's learning how to do things through its own experiences. And we're not at that point yet, but that would be like level two, right? That from my perspective.
Should we be afraid of it or should we embrace it? Um, People were afraid of the internet when it came out. People were afraid of certain tools. They were afraid of blockchain. Um, but we have seen in the past that when companies start to embrace it and find ways to utilize it, um, they have an advantage.
I mean, the dark web is still out there, right? Like there's still a lot of really bad things that are happening on the internet that is segmented away and hidden behind a curtain. But yes, it enabled a lot of both positive and negative. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't come to one individual to be able to say yes or no, we cannot use it. I think the whole idea of like letting a genie out of the bottle and you can't put it back, that's more or less what happens through technology, right? You unlock the internet and you produce again both positive and negative. You unlock crypto, you come up with both positive and negatives there. And with AI, it'll be no different. You'll have both positive and negative there. I mean, there's a lot of scams right now at this moment because of AI, where they could very easily imitate voices and create, impersonate, do deep fakes effectively, right? For crypto scams. right? So this is like the darker side of how it could be leveraged at the moment. But you see them from time to time, right? Elon Musk will show up on one of your videos and say, "Hey, yeah, just go to this website, um, and you'll get some free crypto," right? That's very common at this point in time, and that's probably not going to stop anytime soon. Phishing is there right now because of the internet.
Let's look at some of that history and the growth of fake pictures. So let's start from there.
Mm-hmm.
The UFO pictures, the Bigfoot pictures. Initially, they were in tabloids. Then you had Photoshop that came, and the people who learned how to use that to manipulate photos to be very realistic. But until some of those tools became mainstream, and now people recognize that deep fakes out there, and soon AI with that's completely AI generated videos with even AI generated voice. People are going to learn to recognize what is fake and what is real. It gets harder as the next iteration comes out, but I think we need to lean into how it's doing that to learn when it's fake or not. I mean, that's how we did with Photoshop. Uh, People would share photos all the time and they say, "Can you believe this?" And people take a look at it and say, "Hey, it's been Photoshopped." Um, we just need to be more vigilant about the information that's out there and learn to trust but verify. And I think that's always been important since the internet's been around, even before it's been around.
Yeah, I was gonna say before the internet. I think those are the things that might get a little bit what is it, politicized. But I try not to have too much of a strong opinion there because those things have existed and always will exist. Going back to the whole Photoshop, even something as rudimentary as Photoshop, if I show you two pictures of something, real and unreal, something photoshopped and something not photoshopped, uh, I, I'm pretty confident that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's just really about what's more believable and what isn't. So if you take that same, process over into just about anything, I think that'll be accurate. And to say that everybody needs to stay up to date with technology in order for them to be safer, I don't necessarily think that that's feasible. I think you'll always have people that are fooled. I think there just has to be ramifications for such events, but I don't think that that should hold technology back. But at the same time, I don't think it should go ignored.
Cool. So, what would you tell a business consultant if, with the AI tools that are out there today, um, how can they take advantage of it to stay ahead of the competitors that may take advantage of it? Are they left behind if they don't adopt it?
It's interesting. I don't know that you would stay behind, but I think you could definitely use it towards your advantage. I don't think it's a necessity, but it really depends on what your goals are. It's not something that you could, turn on or employ and then all of a sudden have a massive leg up. But I think there are certain things that it could make easier. Some of those examples, and we've used them ourselves, are in relation to um, being able to produce consistent messaging. So, from a marketing standpoint, if you're into branding whatsoever, you have to understand that brands have to have a consistent message across the board. And this gets really difficult as the people behind the scenes that are, producing this messaging aren't always really, the same ones. And you might have multiple team members all working on, a very specific brand and trying to push different messages around, or create different creatives. One of the things that AI does is you could create what's called AI agents. It's an AI where you've given it the context of what the brand is. So you say, hey, this is the brand, this is the product, this is the brand voice, and this is the customer personas and so forth, and you give it all this information, and it becomes this effectively the brand itself. And then you say, hey, I'm producing this creative. I need you to, give me some copy for this content and do it in the brand voice. And then it produces very consistent, very beautiful, content. In most cases, as usual, you want to have some, human element to be able to criticize, maybe adjust, editing, essentially, the final output. But this becomes really, really helpful, and eliminates a lot of the inconsistency. So it gives you a more precise outcome of this content. So it's just one example, and you could use this for anything, right? You could use it for social media responses. You could use it for ad creative. You could use it for blog posts. You could use this, one pre-trained AI agent for your brand. The other thing that I've seen, we haven't particularly employed it, is the idea of cold calling. A lot of the clients, this is one of the things that they really want to, see what the potential could ultimately be for some of the clients, or I guess some of the prospects that they're targeting. And the whole premise here is a lot of the conversational AI models. So that kind of includes being able to take in audio. So it's multimodal to some degree, where you're taking in the audio that's coming in from the caller or the person that you're calling. You're taking in the context of all the information that you're trying to produce. You're being interrupted in some of those conversations, and so it becomes a very fluid back and forth conversation. And so you essentially create this artificial lead generator salesperson, right? So outbound calls effectively could become automated. But at the same time, we do employ people at the moment that do effectively just that, right? They do the first phase of outbound calls. They go out there, they reach out to prospects, and they go through just a simple questionnaire effectively. And they do the lead qualification, and then from there, someone else will go in and call them. So that first phase, now we're getting to the point where that could be more or less automated through AI.
Awesome. Great example. And that is an example of where we are not replacing the people, but is really augmenting their work, especially on your example about marketing and the voice there. So we are using AI to basically create a consistent messaging without having AI really producing the complete content. It's there to just basically guide us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's interesting that you've talked about using AI a cold call. And I've seen a lot more businesses, and I've actually looked into it myself on how to utilize AI to be that first layer of reaching out to people and escalating to a human when it needs. And that is a great way you can augment the business, because who likes to cold call? Who likes to pick up and get no and hang ups all the time? But once you get somebody on the line and answer the relevant questions, then that's the person I want to speak with. That's when you say, hey, you're a great candidate. Let me get you over somebody now. So that's a great example for somebody who's looking into cold call but don't have the headcount or the capacity to grow in human capital. An advantage there for AI.
The only thing I wanted to add is I think a lot of people sort of acknowledge that these tools aren't yet perfect, but they're definitely getting there, right? We're right at the cusp of some of these tools genuinely, replacing some additional headcount. And I mean, we can get into that topic too, because I was thinking about it as we were having this, preparing for this conversation. I think I relate a lot of the sort of AI movement to the Industrial Revolution, right? Where you had back in the day housing for hundreds, if not thousands, of workers that all went into, a single place warehouse and did very repetitive tasks. And then the Industrial Revolution came in and they were able to produce more with less headcount. And, it's sad, but it does ultimately replace people. And so I don't think we could shy away from that fact.
It gives an opportunity for somebody, instead of, let's say, I'm going to use this example, but instead of 10 cashiers and one supervisor, those where AI comes in, it kind of elevates a person to play supervisor more so than a cashier,
Correct.
right? You're supervising the AI, and that's where the skills will come in. That's where the advantage is. I wanted to also talk about how some companies, a lot of companies actually, are now looking at AI as an opportunity, but is it too much? I've spoken with some companies that it looks like they're going out of their way to find out how to utilize AI, but not really thinking about the application of it.
Um, I don't know. I haven't run into a lot of those just yet. I feel a lot of the inverse at the moment. I feel a lot of people don't really understand its full capabilities, and maybe that's sort of um, the same problem from different angles, right? It's like, oh yeah, I want to do it, but I don't really know what I want to do with it. And then you get the other people that are like, well, I've always done it this way, and so I'm going to continue to always do it this way, where there's again better means. So yeah, I haven't seen that. I've seen more where again people are kind of more set in their ways, um, without really looking at a lot of the potential gains that they can get from it. Do you have any that come to mind where that was the situation?
Well, you brought up a good example of people don't understand its full capabilities, but want to take advantage of it. So they're basically trying to implement AI where it doesn't really need to be sometimes. Um, they see examples in the news and they hear about it, so they think it's a magic tool. But really, you need to think about the application. You need to think about your users first and foremost, always, and then you think about how AI can make it better for those users, right? At the end of the day, it's not AI using AI; it's a human interacting with AI. So, how do we make it easier for those humans to interact with the AI, whatever its capabilities we need it for? One of the things that I see advantage of is using it to basically handle auditing, proofreading, things that humans do, but we where we need to audit that work, but now we don't need another human audit at work. We could use AI to basically make sure our data's sound and secure by just running it.
So I think let's maybe separate or get more into the weeds of what AI is. I think when people think about AI at this current moment, because it's been so popularized, they're really just thinking about language models. And language models have a very specific purpose, and that purpose is to be able to predict what the next word will be. And in that sense, right, when you ask it a question, it's predicting what the answer should be, and then what word's going to come after the next word, and so on. When you do things like, let's say, auditing, we dive into another part of it. Like if you throw a language model into auditing, let's say a document or a form, it's gonna be pretty useless.
I've seen examples where it's gotten math questions wrong because they're not designed to
Correct.
use
Yeah,
that type of
math
logic.
math is a really good example, right? Like you tell it, hey, do this mathematical equation, and it just it blows up, right? Like it doesn't know how to do that.
Well,
That's not
it's going to
purpose.
respond with what I understand conversation to be. So the more complicated it is, the more wrong it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but again, now we dive back into what AI kind of is under the covers, and it's another form of machine learning, right? Again, trying to use some of the more common or normalized terms. But with machine learning, yes, you could totally do auditing, and you could definitely do mathematics. There's machine learning for videos and images, image recognition. That was, there a long time before ChatGPT or GPT ever came out. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different AI tools out there, depending on what the job is. Um, to add to that, I think you were talking about, people trying to fit it in to places where it didn't belong, or like overly using it. And I think that's also very common. And there's a lot of engineers and companies finding this out as well. Similar to the example that I mentioned earlier, where you know GPT-4 was just like throwing everything in the kitchen sink into the model itself. Now you're getting more specialized. There's a lot of systems where they're doing a lot of this work outside of AI models. They're doing a lot of work beforehand to do, again, you know, validation, mathematics, whatever it may be, before they hand it off to AI and say, hey, all this has been resolved, blah, blah, blah. Now you do the part that you do best. So it's not a throw at anything and you'll get the best result. It is a tool and you have to use it like one. You have to think about it and think about where it makes the most sense. At least that's how I would do it. That's how we would do it from an engineering and solutions perspective.
Awesome. And I kind of thought about it, and it's interesting that you've emphasized the word tool here, because I've thought about the calculator where people have said, oh, you're not going to always have a calculator, so you're going to have to remember these formulas. But now we have calculators everywhere. And then Wikipedia didn't became a thing. You're not going to always have this information in the palm of your hands. And now we do.
Right.
And AI as a tool as well, we're going to have to be comfortable with it being available everywhere. And AI is already in the palm of our hands with some of these new chips that are out there, the tensor chips that are in the Google phones. I believe Apple has AI chips as well in their phones. So they're utilizing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's already in our hands.
I mean, it's in the cloud, right? So it's on, some of the older Nokias, as long as they have internet connection, I'm sure you could get it to do something. But yes, it's going to be with us at all times. And again, there's problems with that. There's two problems. There's one where OpenAI is trying to solve, where we're producing more content now that is generated by AI itself. And they're a little bit cautious about what will happen where it starts feeding itself, where it gets information that is produced by itself and then put back into the system. Remember, because we kind of grab everything and throw it back into it. And will it start becoming dumber effectively? Right. Those are some of the things that they're actually starting to notice already. So back to an earlier comment where you said it wasn't magic. It really is magic. Some of the engineers right now, they know how it works, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they could predict what it'll do. Right. And I think that's the thing where you cannot control it like you do more programmatic systems before. It's you throw something at it and you have an idea of what it should do, but sometimes it'll surprise you. Most recently, and this has kind of been out there quite a lot, is the idea of where they just found out that you could tip AI and it actually produces better. So if you tell it, hey, write this, piece of content, and if you do it better, I'll give you a 20% tip. Like you just lie to it, it literally will do a better job. And so you increase the amount of tip you give it, and it produces better outcomes. It goes to a point where some of the things don't even make sense, because I think it was something where somebody said, hey, I'll give you a dog treat. And it produced better than if it gave it like $200 tip. So just again, doesn't make a lot of sense because it is magic under the hood. Nobody really understands it.
Magic.
Magic.
let's talk about some of that magic. And of course, when something's magic, we want to be able to utilize some of that. We wield some of that power. Are there any future projects that you have in mind that you want to do with AI?
Mm, personally, myself, I haven't really thought about anything that I would want to use it for. I'm more or less keeping my ear to the ground to see what comes available. We have a lot more AI coming out in regards to video, photography, art, music, a lot more creative aspects of it. It will be interesting to shape and determine what content at the end of the day is. I guess going back to some of my, personal takes on this is like I love art. And what happens when AI is the one that is producing the art and you're producing the prompts for it to produce it. Is that still your creation or is it the creation of AI itself? So little things like that are really interesting to think about. You're no longer wielding the paintbrush per se, right? But I don't know. It'll be fun.
It still requires some vision, and the what an artist is maybe a little bit different, or what even an AI artist is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be a genre in itself because it does require some talent and vision to create the right prompts to produce certain images. Um, I know it's going to make things easier. It makes things accessible. Let's think about cameras becoming more accessible as they are added to phones. We the amount of videos, images that we get these days, and the quality of content that is produced now. There's some great vision out there. So does AI provide that tool where we could have somebody with the vision but not the talent to produce something incredible?
Yeah, talent or means, right? Because some of these means could be time, some of these means could be, people to help produce certain things. We just talked about some of the things that AI could effectively replace. And yeah, with people being able to have access to, I guess, an infinite amount of resources from that perspective, yeah, it would be really interesting to see what happens. I think you could do a lot more with a lot less if you have the right vision.
Awesome. Well, hey, listeners, tell us, what do you think about AI? Tell us, how do you use it or plan to use it or plan to avoid it even?
Borin, what do you think would be some of the either better applications that you could foresee, or what do you think the future of it will be from a product standpoint?
So I think we've kind of danced around this topic of it really being an assistant. You mentioned it as a companion as well, and that's what it really is. AI, it can function without a user, but it really shines and its value is there when it is acting as an assistant or a companion. It knows how to respond based on what we give it. It responds a certain way. And as long as we're continuously giving it feedback on that response, it becomes better. And it will really, again, as I mentioned earlier, that it would be attuned to you and it'll know you as a person. So it becomes just a better model as you work with it over time.
Did you ever watch the movie Her?
I have not.
Man, you got to watch it. It's about, I think they were called operating systems. I'm not entirely sure why, but I guess maybe computers are no longer really a thing and it's really just operating systems, and operating systems end up being your personal assistant, artificial intelligence. And it gets to the point where, they're very, very close companions. And yeah, in this particular scenario, it replaces human companionship with artificial companionship. So that's kind
Well,
of like the, the futurist aspect of it, right? Is like, at what point does it get too personal?
well, let's look at some of the companionships that were built around when the internet were released. Some people have built this companionship with people online that they never have met and probably sometimes never plan to meet.
Hmm.
And so, what's the difference between talking to an actual person on the other side versus an AI that can relate to you? You know, is providing you that comfort and release and companionship. You know, was in a safe way. You know, as we think about how predatory some people can be, can AI be that companionship without the dangers?
Yeah, and I think some people would argue that one of them is an actual human being and another one is, you know, not.
I mean, who are we to say and judge based on who wants to have relationships with what?
That is true. That is true. To each their own, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you see the future of it predominantly being on the assistive side.
Well, let's look at how some things that the internet has brought, and even YouTube. Um, Today's generation, they have information at their fingertips, a lot more accessible than the generation before. And it came through, the internet, then YouTube became really easily an easy resource for that. And soon AI will be that resource. They're going to be able to gather information and deliver it even more efficiently,
Mhm.
less time searching for it. So we're going to see people obtain information more seamlessly, more quickly. What are they going to do with that information, or what kind of information is going to be delivered? I don't know. But I really see AI being that next kind of gateway for just information. And maybe even AI could even determine what is the next big thing for itself.
How different is it to think about it from a product standpoint where you have an assistant, let's say very similar to an Alexa or a Google, or Siri, where you have this one individual companion that helps you do a lot of things, as opposed to one from, depending on what the service may be. So I think I'm thinking more about it from a, like, let's say a support chatbot, right? Do At some point, do you see that support chatbots become obsolete because your companion is able to assist you with intimate details of another product or another service? Do they at some point become entwined, or will there always be a separation?
Some of the challenges that I have, let's use calendars for example, because I have several different types of calendar between my work, the family, my personal, and just balancing that and trying to schedule things. It can really be a challenge. But what if I know there are tools and ways to kind of combine everything, but it takes work. But with AI, if we can integrated a lot more with the things we use, it can take that information and basically can help you save time with the things you need to do without you needing to set it up first. And I see AI being an advantage there. And as you mentioned, with the different AIs that you have, um, I would like to see it work a lot better because I use Google myself, and depending on the information that I have in one place versus another, sometimes there's a disconnect. And the things that I wanted to do, sometimes it doesn't understand me because my requests may sound too complex for it. Whereas AI can figure out what to do that with that information, or probably if it doesn't understand, even ask me questions on clarifying what that is. So it's a lot more conversational as it resolves my problem.
So it sounds like you would hope that the systems become more integrated across the board, And even if they are independent systems, that there's a way to reach them without having to go out of your way.
Right, right. And then I know that we have a lot of experience integrating different systems and automating things because that's what we do. But I could foresee AI making that a lot easier. We see a couple of tools out there. What's that service that we use to easily connect to different services?
Zapier?
Yes, Zapier. We see Zapier kind of take a step forward by being a middleman or between two different systems. And it's a pretty easy tool to use because you could go through some of the libraries that other people have created and use them. But AI can even bridge that gap further and through conversation, even taking that information to create those integration for you without you basically inputting data where it tells you to, but instead maybe saying, "Hey AI, go connect my Google Calendar with my Outlook."
Yeah, I totally agree. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think I want to see, and I guess maybe it is on the companionship part of things, but I want to see it more on the problem solving aspect of things. I don't want to see AI as solely an assistant. I want to see it being used more to effectively automate some of the reoccurring challenges, and maybe even some of the non-reoccurring challenges where people are necessary.
And that's kind of where, in a way, I would view it as an assistant, right? Something really repetitive. Please do this for me once a day in the morning, right? And that's kind of how I view an effective assistant. And then you said problem solving, and we're going to see that. We're going to see that through in the medical field, right? Because some people don't have access to very skilled doctors, and but we can see AI take some of that data and maybe based on this most skillful doctors come with a diagnosis that they wouldn't have known otherwise. We're going to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds scary, but at the same time, it would be really ideal if you could actually have virtual doctors that you didn't need to speak to a real doctor at all, right? If the diagnosis itself was so accurate from artificial intelligence where it knew, hey, this is X. And it's kind of been proven, especially in the medical field, where AI could do better than a physical human doctor. And again, I'm not really sort of promoting and saying that that is the thing that should happen, but I'm thinking it would be great if it did, right? It would be great if our confidence level, if the technology got to a point where you visited a virtual doctor, gave it information, right? Again, multi-model is already there, visual, auditory, um, text-based, anything, right? All this information, you essentially provided it, and then it's able to give you a more accurate diagnosis than a physical doctor, be able to prescribe you something and go about your way. I think that cuts down the cost, you know, across the board for everybody.
And absolutely, because one of the advantage there, you're giving it the experience and information based on the best doctor and have capacity to contain more information than a human mind can even have. And as long as you train it on the correct model, right? And it's really important to train on that data.
Right, and I think this goes back to the specialization part and the newer studies that are coming out, where the better the data that you provided, the better the outcomes. And so if you take that and then you say, hey, we're gonna create a virtual doctor, right, which its sole purpose is to do these sort of diagnosis, then yeah, you're effectively creating a much better doctor, and I think that that in itself is very, very feasible. And it's not, and it's not an assistant, right? And I kind of want to combat that, right? Like I don't think the
Yeah.
assistant is the only way forward. I think there's a lot of true better outcomes or uses for artificial intelligence.
Yes. And what I was going to say is, as long as you train it well enough, you can even keep biases out of it that humans seem to have.
Mhm.
But speaking of biases, people are thinking that AI currently has biases towards certain people just based on the data it was trained off of.
Correct, right? And again, that goes back to the clean input versus throwing everything at it. If you get data that is, I don't know. I guess you'll get a handful of individuals, right, with so much diversity that oversee the data that's being actually put into the system, and then able to train it enough on just that, the best possible data that we're able to come up with at this point in time. Yeah, you end up with a lot better outcomes. So cool. Um,
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's other ones. I think there's like going back to the lead generation piece. I think you could train even again, we're kind of at the cusp of it. There are some companies that are building these products out at the moment as we speak. Um, that are some of them are okay. Nothing I would say is like great and perfect, but you're able to create lead generation outbound callers, sales agents, and do the first phase of the sales process without a human. You know, obviously the other humans on the other side. It'd be interesting if you got AI to AI, right? As a customer, I throw my AI in front and say like, "Hey, you need to talk to my AI to see whether or not you could talk to me as a person," right? Uh, maybe that's what we should do, like some spam blockers on that regard.
So back to an assistant companion,
Yeah, yeah,
of course.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And that's actually what we're gonna see. We're gonna see how AI interact with each other in the future. It will be an interesting
Yeah.
it will be an interesting landscape when we get there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us talk about AI. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. For future episodes, let us know what you want to hear about. What do you want to see discussed? And even talk about some problems that you may want us to cover. See you next time.
Hasta la vista, baby.